The moment the boarding gate swung open, Isabella Hart strutted forward, her arm linked tightly with her mother's. She was dressed to kill in a sleek, light beige suit today, her makeup flawless and her hair pinned up in an absolute masterpiece. A swarm of company executives trailed behind her like loyal dogs, while the Hart family relatives crowded around, every face practically bursting with excitement and a desperate eagerness to please. After all, this wasn't just any flight, it was a fully chartered private trip to celebrate the company's record-breaking quarterly performance. Isabella had made a massive deal out of taking the entire family and her core executives on a lavish 3-day island vacation. The Airport 5 IP lounge, the exclusive private passage, the dedicated flight crew, and the 5-star island hotel, every single detail was arranged to absolute perfection. She stood at the dead center of the crowd like a radiant queen basking in the spotlight, while I was left quietly dragging my own beat-up suitcase. Trailing at the very back of the line, my brother-in-law Marcus threw a nasty glance over his shoulder and actually sneered at me. "Hey, brother-in-law, why on earth are you still hauling your own luggage? At a fancy occasion like this, you could at least pretend to care about your image. My sister is a big shot now. As her husband, the least you could do is not look like total garbage." I just quietly stared at the scuffed black carry-on in my hand. It was a birthday gift Isabella had given me exactly 3 years ago. Back then, she had flashed a sweet, hopeful smile and said, "Arthur, from now on, let's take a romantic trip together every single year." Her company had only just gotten off the ground that year. Money was incredibly tight, to the point where I was the one covering her office rent. She couldn't afford anything luxurious, so she picked out this completely ordinary suitcase. Right there in the middle of the mall, she held my hand tight and promised she would make it up to me once she struck it rich. I've faithfully used that bag ever since. It wasn't because I couldn't afford a shiny new one, but because I simply couldn't bear to part with the memories. Too bad the woman who gave it to me had long forgotten the promises she made that day. My charming mother-in-law, Margaret, caught Marcus's snide remarks and spun around to shoot me a withering glare, her brow deeply furrowed. "Arthur, I'm really not trying to pick on you, but every single important executive from the company is going to be on that plane tonight. Stop acting like a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world. Once we board, just keep your mouth shut and do not embarrass Isabella." I kept my mouth shut. Isabella, predictably, acted like she hadn't heard a single word, keeping her eyes glued to her phone screen. Her pretty boy male secretary, Philip, was busy holding her iced coffee, speaking to her in a gentle, intimate tone that definitely didn't belong to a simple subordinate. "Miss Hart, you really need to rest once we get on the plane. I've already instructed the head flight attendant to prepare a cozy blanket and some warm milk just for you. You were up way too late last night reviewing that massive proposal. Please don't push yourself too hard today." Isabella finally looked up, her expression cool and indifferent, yet she made absolutely zero effort to step back from his incredibly close proximity. Thanks for your hard work," she murmured. Philip flashed a sickeningly sweet smile, his gaze sweeping over me with a very obvious hint of smug provocation. Oh, I knew exactly why he was looking at me like that. Over the past 6 months, everyone in Isabella's orbit knew she had snagged a young, super attentive male secretary. He was the guy who constantly fussed over her weak stomach, the one always waiting to hand her a glass of warm water right after every intense meeting, shadowed her on every business trip, and drove her home in the dead of night. Hell, some gossips in the company openly joked that Philip acted way more like Isabella's real husband than I ever did. I had heard all the nasty whispers, and I had directly warned Isabella about it. At the time, she was lounging on the living room sofa. She didn't even bother lifting her head from her work, just sighed and said, "Arthur Black, could you seriously not be so damn petty for once? Philip is just incredibly competent at his job. I absolutely need someone like him right by my side." I completely stopped arguing after that. I finally realized that when someone starts making endless excuses for another person crossing the line, no matter how much you scream or beg, it only makes you look like the crazy, insecure one. Just as I finally reached the cabin door, Captain Collins was standing tall at the front of the plane. The second he locked eyes with me, his expression shifted drastically, and he instinctively snapped his back ramrod straight. I gave him a nearly invisible shake of my head, and Collins instantly understood the assignment. He didn't utter a single word, simply falling back into the standard VIP reception procedure to warmly greet the rest of the oblivious passengers. Isabella clicked her expensive high heels and strutted into the massive cabin first, leaving Margaret to gasp in absolute awe. As soon as she crossed the threshold, she cried out, "Oh my lord, a private jet really is on a whole other level. This blows first class out of the water. Isabella, sweetheart, you have truly made it to the top. I never in a million years thought I would get to fly on a privately chartered plane before I died." Her father, Richard, was practically glowing with smug pride. "I always told you Isabella had exactly what it takes. The entire Hart family is going to rely on her to carry our legacy and reputation from now on." A random relative eagerly chimed in from the back. "Isabella is just so incredible. This right here is the ultimate flex of a top-tier female CEO. Chartering a whole plane just for an overseas trip. Doesn't that just sound insanely impressive?" Isabella let a tiny, proud smirk tug at the corners of her mouth, though she tried to play it completely cool. "Oh, stop it, you guys. It is just a perfectly ordinary team-building event. Please, don't make such a massive deal out of it." Philip casually leaned in beside her, adding with a slick smile, "Miss Hart has always been incredibly generous to both her beloved family and her loyal employees. I made sure to personally oversee the entire flight route and all the luxury hotel arrangements this time, just to guarantee that every single one of you has the most comfortable trip imaginable." The guy said it so smoothly and naturally, acting as if he was the actual boss who arranged this massive private jet. I didn't bother calling out his pathetic bluff. Instead, I just looked quietly down at the boarding pass clutched in my hand. It was always the seat right next to Isabella. For 3 long years of marriage, no matter how crazy busy she was, my seat was always right beside hers at every single formal event. It wasn't because she actually valued me that much, but simply because everyone else knew I was her husband. But the second I stepped into the front cabin, I completely froze in my tracks. Philip was chilling in seat 1A. His suit jacket was casually tossed over the armrest, and Isabella's tablet and files were right there next to him. He looked so damn comfortable, like that seat had always belonged to him. Isabella was in seat 1B, just flipping through her paperwork. I stood there in the aisle, quietly watching the two of them. The air in the cabin went dead silent for a moment. A few of the company executives noticed what was happening, exchanging these knowing, awkward glances. The Hart family relatives also completely stopped their chattering, their eyes darting back and forth between me and Philip. Philip finally looked up, acting like he had just noticed I was standing there. "Mr. Blake, sorry about that," he said. He sounded apologetic, but his body didn't move an inch. "Miss Hart has a few documents to review during the flight, so I'm just sitting here to help her get organized." I just stared at him. "That is my seat." Philip's fake smile stiffened for a split second, then quickly snapped right back to normal. "I know, but as you can see, this is strictly for work. There are plenty of empty seats further back. You can sit literally anywhere." Margaret immediately chimed in from the side. "Oh, it's just a seat, Arthur. Don't make such a huge deal out of it. Philip works for Isabella. He didn't take your seat on purpose." Marcus was lounging in the back row with his legs crossed, a nasty sneer on his face. "Come on, brother-in-law, you're not actually jealous of a secretary, are you? At your age, try not to be so damn undignified. At my age, I'm 33. Philip is 28. In the Hart family's eyes, I was just some pathetic, washed-up husband. Meanwhile, the guy sitting right next to my wife was young, capable, and sensible. And hey, it was quote-unquote just work. I didn't even bother responding to them. I just looked straight at Isabella. "Do you think I should go sit in the back too?" Isabella finally bothered to look up. There was a heavy hint of impatience in her eyes, like I was somehow embarrassing her in front of everyone. "Arthur, there are a lot of people here today. Don't make a scene. Philip sitting here really is just more convenient for my work. We will talk about it after we land. Just." Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. That exact phrase hit me right in the face like a physical slap. Not too hard, but not too light either. Over the past 3 years, I had heard those words way too many times. When Philip drove her home late at night and I dared to ask about it, she told me not to make a scene. When Philip put a necklace on her at her own birthday party, I silently walked away from the table and she told me not to make a scene. When Philip posted a picture of her back on his social media, writing the caption, "There are always some people worth staying up all night for," I asked him to respect some boundaries and she told me not to make a scene. And now, on a freaking plane that I paid for, sitting right beside my wife, Philip stole my seat and she still tells me, "Don't make a scene." Suddenly, I felt completely exhausted. Not angry, but that deep, soul-crushing weariness that comes when your heart has been slowly hollowed out over time. I looked deep into her eyes and asked her one final time, "Isabella, are you sure?" Isabella's brow furrowed even deeper in annoyance. "Arthur Blake, do you seriously have to embarrass me in front of everyone?" She didn't directly answer me, but her icy attitude was all the answer I needed. Philip lowered his head, but I saw the corner of his mouth lift into this barely noticeable, smug little smirk. Marcus actually let out a loud laugh. "Oh, come on, brother-in-law, that is enough. My sister practically chartered a plane just to take you out on a trip, and you're still standing there putting on airs. Let's be real, without my sister, would a guy like you ever get to ride in a private jet in this lifetime?" A few people sitting nearby couldn't help but snicker. My father-in-law, Richard, let out this loud fake cough to get everyone's attention. "Arthur, a real man should be magnanimous. Isabella is incredibly busy with her career right now, and as her husband, you need to support her, not cause her pointless trouble." I looked at all of their faces, so painfully self-righteous, and suddenly I let out a laugh too. It turns out that when you finally reach a moment of absolute clarity, you don't get hysterical. You don't argue, you don't question them, and you don't ask why with teary, red-rimmed eyes. Do you even see me as your husband? Because honestly, the answer was already staring me right in the face. I just nodded. Okay. And with that, I turned on my heel and started walking straight toward the cabin door. Isabella was genuinely taken aback. "Where are you going?" I didn't even look back. "Arthur." Her tone turned completely cold. "Do not push it. The plane is about to take off and everyone is waiting on you. What do you even mean by getting off right now?" I stopped in my tracks and finally turned around to look at her. "It means exactly what it looks like. I am not going on this trip." Philip immediately stood up, slapping on this incredibly fake, troubled expression. "Mr. Blake, please don't let me ruin everyone's mood. If you really mind that much, I can. You don't need to get up." I coldly interrupted him. "If you want to sit there, then sit." The entire cabin grew even quieter. Everyone in there thought I was just throwing a stubborn temper tantrum. Isabella clearly thought so too. She glared at me, her voice pure ice. "If you walk off this plane today, do not expect me to come crawling back to coax you." I looked at her, and in that split second, the very last tiny spark of warmth I held in my heart completely burned out. "Isabella, from today on, you never need to coax me again." And with that, I stepped right out of the cabin door. The moment I stepped outside, Colin and the entire flight crew were already lined up, standing at perfect attention. The second they saw me, they all lowered their heads in unison. "Young master." Their voices were crisp, uniform, and deeply respectful, completely drowning out all the pathetic, confused murmurs coming from inside the cabin. An absolute dead silence dropped behind me. Isabella followed me to the cabin door, the icy glare on her face freezing over as reality finally hit her. Philip shot to his feet, all the colour draining from his face. Beside me, Colin looked up, his voice careful and quiet. "Sir, are we still taking off?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned around, letting my eyes sweep over the packed cabin. Marcus, the guy who'd been laughing in my face just minutes ago, was standing there with his jaw practically hitting the floor. Margaret's smug sneer had completely shattered into pure shock. Richard was gripping his seat like his life depended on it, his eyes darting around in panic. The company executives were exchanging nervous glances, suddenly realizing the brutal truth: the real VIP of this private charter wasn't Isabella, like they all assumed. And Isabella? She just stood at the door, staring at me like I was a total stranger she was seeing for the very first time. I pulled my gaze away and said, "Cool as ice, we're grounded. Cancel the flight." Colin immediately bowed his head. "Understood, young master." In that exact second, Isabella's face contorted into something incredibly ugly. She probably never, in a million years, thought I'd humiliate her in front of a crowd like this, let alone hear the flight crew call me their young master. In her twisted little mind, Arthur Blake was just her trophy husband, a guy with zero ambition, some antisocial loser who was happy just staying home to cook her dinner. A boring pushover who never fought back, meaning she could just take advantage of me over and over again. She thought she could just let Philip steal my seat and shut me down in front of her family and staff with a pathetic little "don't make a scene." But she forgot one crucial detail. Just because I play nice doesn't mean I won't bite back. Colin turned to the flight attendant and murmured a quick order. A few seconds later, the cabin intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that this flight has been temporarily cancelled due to a change in itinerary authorization. Please gather your belongings and step off the aircraft in an orderly manner." The entire cabin absolutely exploded. "Cancelled? What do you mean cancelled? I thought this was a private charter. You can't just cancel a private jet." "Miss Hart, what the hell is going on? The resort is already booked. The island shuttles are waiting." The executives all turned their panicked eyes to Isabella, while her snobby relatives started completely losing it. Margaret was the first one to storm up to the door, shrieking at the top of her lungs, "Arthur Blake, have you completely lost your damn mind? Everyone is already seated, and you just decide to ground the plane. Do you care about Isabella's reputation at all?" I stood at the top of the stairs, not moving an inch. "When you all banished me to the back of the plane 5 minutes ago, none of you seemed to care about my dignity." Margaret violently choked on her words, her face draining to white before flushing a bright, furious red. Marcus pushed his way to the front, clutching his limited edition designer bag, pointing a finger right in my face. "Who the hell do you think you are? So what if you kissed up to a couple of flight attendants? Listen here, you loser. My sister chartered this jet and she paid for it. You have zero right to cancel anything." Colin frowned, immediately stepping between us. "Sir, I highly suggest you watch your mouth. This aircraft belongs to the managed fleet under Blue Star Private Aviation, and the absolute financial authorizer for this flight is Mr. Blake." Marcus froze like a deer in headlights. "Authorizer? Wait. Didn't my sister book this?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Marcus, you've driven the luxury cars your sister gave you. You've crashed in the penthouses she booked. You've swiped her black card more times than I can count. Did you honestly never stop to wonder where all her money actually comes from?" Marcus's face instantly burned a humiliating crimson. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? Don't you dare talk down to me." I completely ignored him. That little reality check wasn't for him anyway. It was for Isabella. She slowly walked down the aisle, stopping right in front of me, dropping her voice to a harsh whisper. "Arthur, what exactly are you trying to pull here?" For the first time ever, there was a real tremor of fear in her voice. I looked down at her, totally unfazed. "I'm not pulling anything, Isabella. I'm just taking back what's mine." Her eyes went dark. "Yours? This trip is a corporate retreat. My admin booked this private charter. Since when do you have the authority to cancel it?" I smirked. "Sure, your admin booked the Blue Star VIP line, but that ultra-exclusive family authorization card linked to your account, I issued that to you the day we got married. Every single time you fly private, you're doing it on my dime." I dragged out the words, making sure the absolute humiliation sank deep into her bones. "Isabella, you didn't charter this plane. You used my name." All the blood rushed right out of her face. Philip awkwardly shuffled off the plane right then, forcing a pathetic, tight smile. "Mr. Blake, hey, I really think there's just a huge misunderstanding here. Miss Hart went through the proper corporate channels, and the company is paying for it. grounding an entire flight just because of a petty little personal disagreement. Don't you think you're overreacting just a bit? I stared at him. A personal disagreement? Philip nodded like he was the reasonable one. Look, man, if you're throwing a tantrum because I took your seat, I'm sorry, okay? But kicking everyone off the plane, trashing Isabella's corporate image and ruining everyone's vacation, that's just completely uncalled for. The guy was a smooth talker. I'll give him that. If I was the old Arthur Blake, I probably would have let him guilt-trip me into backing down. In the old days, for Isabella's sake and her so-called bigger picture, I would have just gotten back on that plane, sat quietly in the back row, and pretended. I would have acted like nothing happened at all. But unfortunately for them, today isn't the past. I locked eyes with Philip. Are you apologizing because you actually think you were wrong? Or just because you finally realized I'm the guy in charge of this entire flight? Philip's face instantly went rigid. Isabella scowled, jumping to his defense. Arthur Blake, do you really have to be so harsh? Harsh? I just smiled. Was it not harsh when he stole my seat? Was it not harsh when you told me to swallow my pride and not make a scene? Was it not harsh when your entire family ganged up on me, telling me to be more understanding? Now that I'm just stating the cold, hard facts, you think I'm being harsh? Isabella took a deep breath. She glanced around at the growing crowd staring at us and finally softened her tone just a bit. Fine, let's just say I handled things poorly today. Get the plane in the air first, and we can talk about the rest when we get back home. This was her classic playbook. Whenever things blew up in her face, she absolutely refused to admit she was wrong. Instead, she always expected me to clean up her mess. Once we were alone, she'd brush off the whole argument with a simple, "I've just been under too much pressure lately." I used to buy that excuse every single time, thinking that in a marriage, someone just had to be the bigger person and give in. But then it hit me. If only one person is constantly making sacrifices in a relationship, that isn't tolerance anymore. It's just enabling toxic behavior. I shook my head. We are done talking. Isabella was completely taken aback. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. He picked up on the first ring. "You finally made up your mind?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "Initiate the divorce and the property settlement. Let's start with Blue Star. Cut off the business travel perks and the family authorizations. Revoke the car under Isabella's name, their residency rights at Yunlin Villa, and cancel that guarantee involving Richard." Isabella's eyes went wide with sheer panic. "Arthur Blake," she gasped. I didn't even pause. "Also, pull the records on Philip's flight itinerary. He swapped my seat out for his own name. There has to be a paper trail, not just a verbal arrangement." Philip's arrogant face completely crumbled. My lawyer chuckled darkly over the phone. "Loud and clear, boss. The first batch of eviction and legal notices will be sent out within 30 minutes. I hung up the phone without another word. Isabella stared at me, absolute fury finally rising in her eyes. "You really want to divorce me? Over a stupid seat?" she demanded in total disbelief. I looked right at her and suddenly found the whole situation hilarious. "Isabella, do you seriously still think this is just about a seat?" She went dead silent. Maybe it finally clicked, or maybe she just didn't want to admit the truth. Her mother, Margaret, rushed over and shrieked at me. "Divorce? Arthur Blake? Who the hell are you trying to scare? Do you have any idea what kind of status Isabella has now? Do you really think a powerful CEO like her is afraid of a loser like you? I'm warning you, making a scene like this today, there will come a time when you'll be on your knees begging her." Uncle Richard scowled too. "Arthur, a grown man should know his limits when throwing a childish tantrum. You are embarrassing the entire family right now. What will people think if word of this gets out to the press?" I looked at them with ice in my veins. "Uncle Richard, Aunt Margaret, let me remind you both. From this exact moment on, you better stop talking to me like I'm your son-in-law." Margaret sneered back. "Oh, what? Are you going to try and disown us now?" I stared at her completely flatly. "It's not about disowning you. It's just the fact that you bloodsuckers won't be my family for much longer." As those words hung in the air, the color slowly drained from Margaret's arrogant face. Right on cue, Marcus's phone started ringing. He answered it, and after listening for barely 5 seconds, his smug expression vanished. What do you mean the car loan is overdue? That's impossible. Wasn't that luxury car paid off in full? He whipped his head around and glared at me. I kept my voice perfectly calm. I bought that car, and it's legally registered under Blue Star's commercial lending division. I just let you borrow it. I never actually gave it to you. Marcus gripped his phone so hard, his knuckles turned white, his voice trembling. What? What do you mean? Are you saying you're taking my car back? At that exact second, Margaret got a call of her own. What do you mean all the villa property services are suspended? Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I am Isabella Hart's mother. But whatever the person on the other end of the line said next, it made Margaret's face turn from pale white to a sickly green. She stared at me, completely horrified. Arthur Blake, you're even going after the house we live in. I quickly corrected her delusion. That is not your house. I bought it with my own money. I bought it before this marriage even started. You freeloaders have just been crashing there for 3 years. Right outside the airport VIP lounge, the same group of people who had been hyping up their luxury chartered trip were now frozen in pure shock. Their expensive luggage was piled uselessly at their feet. The snobby relatives exchanged awkward, panicked glances. The corporate executives bowed their heads, pretending they hadn't heard a thing, but they couldn't resist sneaking sideways glances at Isabella. Isabella no longer looked anything like the commanding, untouchable female CEO she portrayed. She just stood there in the middle of the crowd, pale-faced, biting her lip. Philip reached out to comfort her, but she instinctively flinched away from his touch. I noticed the little gesture and couldn't help but smirk. Oh, so now you know to keep your distance from him? Too little, too late. I turned my back on them and walked straight toward the VIP exit. Isabella called out from behind me, Arthur Blake, you stop right there. I didn't even break my stride. Her voice trembled with suppressed, desperate fury. If you walk away today, we are truly over for good. I paused for half a second, glancing over my shoulder to look at her one last time. Isabella, from the exact second you let that parasite sit in my seat, we were already dead and buried. After leaving the airport, I didn't bother going back to that empty house. Instead, I headed straight to a high-end private club owned by the Blue Star Group. I barely ever hung out at that place to begin with, and after tying the knot, I practically swore off the entire scene. Isabella absolutely hated me rubbing elbows with the so-called rich second-generation crowd. She constantly complained that those heirs were nothing but frivolous and totally unreliable. Back then, I honestly thought she just had a good head on her shoulders, but looking back, I finally realized it wasn't the frivolous lifestyle she actually despised. She just couldn't stand the fact that I had a world she couldn't control. By the time my lawyer finally arrived, I was chilling by the floor-to-ceiling window, just watching the planes take off and touch down at the airport. He dropped a massive stack of legal documents right onto the table with a heavy thud. We have successfully pulled all the surveillance footage from the airport, along with the official boarding logs from the cabin. Philip actually went in and modified the passenger list exactly 2 hours before takeoff. He literally swapped out your seat, 1A, and replaced it with his own name. The system logs show the operation used Isabella's admin access, but the actual login pinged straight from Philip's computer. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Did she know about this? I asked. Right now, the evidence can only prove that she tacitly signed off on the aftermath right there at the scene. As for whether she planned it beforehand, we will just have to wait for the recovered chat logs to finish downloading. I gave a slow nod, and the lawyer shot me a questioning look. Are you really pulling the trigger on this divorce? I let out a dry laugh. Weren't you the one begging me to dump her ages ago? He leaned back in his leather chair and let out a heavy sigh. I told you to do it because I was sick to my stomach watching it all unfold. You literally drained the Blake family's massive resources to spoon-feed a pack of ungrateful leeches. You just handed over the keys to Yunjian Villa to her parents, let her deadbeat brother and greedy relatives joyride in 3 of your luxury cars, you completely bailed out your father-in-law's disastrous investments, and you practically handed over the entire Blue Star business travel supply chain to Isabella when her company was on the verge of total bankruptcy. And what the hell did you get for all that? Her delusional family actually thinks you are some worthless freeloader. Her two-faced secretary thinks he can just walk all over you to climb the corporate ladder, and your own wife genuinely believes you are just being crazy and unreasonable. I didn't even try to argue back, because every single word he said was dead on. 3 years ago, when I first married Isabella, she was absolutely nothing like the glamorous, high and mighty Miss Hart everyone envies today. She was just a stubborn girl refusing to take over her family's half-dead, sinking trading company, desperately wanting to pivot into the elite world of high-end customized business travel. She had this fierce ambition and unbreakable resilience, and honestly, I really admired that fire in her. So instead of just dumping cold hard cash on her to buy her success, I quietly worked behind the scenes to help her build up her resources, step by grueling step. I secretly funneled high-paying clients her way, unlocked restricted parts of my supply chain, and literally used the Blake family's side hustles just to artificially boost her very first batch of orders. I was so terrified she would feel too pressured, so scared she would think I was looking down on her, that I just kept my mouth completely shut. I fed her a lie, saying those elite clients were just blown away by her brilliant proposals. I told her the luxury hotels partnered with her out of respect for her sincerity, and the airlines slashed their prices simply to expand their market share, and she swallowed every single word of it. But later on, it wasn't just her anymore. The whole damn world believed the hype. They all thought Isabella was some kind of natural-born business genius, while I was just the lucky, useless husband standing in her shadow, leeching off her glorious success. The lawyer flipped open the heavy file. So, which part of this mess do you want to liquidate first? Every single drop of it. He immediately raised a surprised eyebrow. Damn, that is cold-blooded. It is not ruthless, I replied smoothly, staring blankly out the window. I am just officially done being a naive idiot. The lawyer started sliding the legal documents across the polished table, one by one. The very first file was the deed for Yunnan Villa. I bought that massive estate long before we even tied the knot, and the property rights are solely under my name. Right after the wedding, Isabella started whining about how her parents' old neighborhood was way too rundown and inconvenient. So, like a fool, I let her whole family move in, covering absolutely every single dime for the premium property management, the daily cleaning crews, the private drivers, the landscaping, and the 24/7 security. The second file was a luxury vehicle usage agreement, that flashy sports car Marcus loved to show off in, the premium business van Richard constantly abused, and even that high-end family SUV Margaret took on her daily shopping sprees. Every single one of them technically belonged to a commercial lending firm operating right under my Blue Star empire. The third folder exposed all the massive wire transfers and shady debt guarantees. Richard had completely tanked a risky investment 2 years ago, racking up an absolutely staggering amount of debt. Isabella had cried her eyes out, begging me to bail him out, sobbing that the old man needed to protect his precious ego and couldn't bear to let the extended family find out about his failure. So I stepped in, provided a massive bridge guarantee, and quietly filled that massive financial black hole for them. The fourth file was the very first seed loan I pumped into Isabella's company. I never once asked her to pay me back because we were husband and wife back then. But now that this toxic marriage is crashing and burning, every last cent of debt is getting called in. The lawyer smirked and said, "The second these eviction and collection notices hit their doorsteps, they are going to absolutely lose their minds tonight." I cut in, "Then let them crash and burn." Just as those words left my mouth, my phone started buzzing on the table. It was Isabella. I glanced coldly at the screen, but didn't bother picking up. She desperately called me 3 separate times, and I ruthlessly hit decline every single time. The fourth call buzzing through was from Margaret. This time I swiped to answer. Her shrill voice nearly shattered the speaker on my phone. "Arthur Blake, you turn those property services back on this instant." The live-in nanny just suddenly packed up and quit. The driver vanished into thin air, and the security team literally just told us they are abandoning their patrol posts at the villa after tonight. What the hell is the meaning of this? Are you seriously trying to drive our family into the ground? Margaret, I replied, keeping my voice chillingly calm. I am the one who pays for that massive service contract out of my own pocket. It is perfectly reasonable for me to just stop renewing it right now. Reasonable, my foot. We have lived in this luxury house for 3 years now. This is our home. None of your names are anywhere on the property deed. Margaret was literally shaking with furious rage on the other end. Do you have absolutely no shame? Isabella has been married to your worthless self for 3 whole years. What is so wrong with letting her own parents live in this house? Isn't it a man's duty to provide? Yeah, I provided, I told her, and that is exactly why I am completely done. Dead silence hung on the line for a heartbeat, and then she completely lost it, screaming even louder. I always knew you were pathetic, she spat. What is the big deal about a stupid seat anyway? Philip is young. He's got talent. Why shouldn't he work right beside Isabella? Why is a grown man like you so threatened by him? I couldn't help but let out a dry, bitter laugh. Well, since Philip is just so capable, I said, let him pay your property fees. Let him hire your drivers, clear your debts and buy you a new car. That shut Margaret up real quick. I hung up before she could even breathe. Less than a minute later, my phone blew up. It was Marcus. Arthur Blake. Who the hell do you think you are, towing my ride? Do you have any idea I had plans with my boys tonight? I've been driving that car for 2 years. Everyone in my circle knows it belongs to me. And now you just snatch it back? How am I supposed to show my face? Are you even a real man, taking your anger out on me just because you fought with my sister? I glanced at the screen and typed back exactly 1 sentence. Hand over those keys by 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, or I'm reporting it as criminal trespassing. He instantly spammed me with a dozen voice notes. I didn't listen to a single one, just blocked him. The lawyer sitting next to me burst out laughing. Man, how on earth did you tolerate this circus for so long? I stayed quiet for a moment. Because I always thought marriage meant you didn't keep score, I finally murmured. The lawyer nodded slowly. Sure, a healthy marriage isn't about keeping score. But when they start treating you like an ATM, if you don't keep track, they'll bleed you completely dry. It was brutally harsh, but honestly, it was the absolute truth. At 8 o'clock that night, I finally dragged myself back to the house Isabella and I had shared since our wedding. The second I pushed the door open, the living room lights were blazing and there was Isabella on the couch, her face as cold as solid ice. She had clearly been waiting a long time to ambush me. The moment she saw me, she sprang up. Her very first words, "Are you finally done throwing this ridiculous tantrum?" I casually dropped my keys on the entryway table. I wasn't throwing a tantrum. Oh, really? Cancelling the private jet, humiliating my entire family and the executives right there at the airport, cutting off the villa fees, firing my parents' drivers, and even repossessing Marcus's car? Arthur Blake, what exactly are you trying to prove here? I slowly took off my coat, draping it over my arm. I'm proving that every single luxury you enjoy isn't a God-given right. Isabella's eyes flickered with genuine shock. Then she let out a cruel, mocking laugh. So what now? Do you want me to write you a thank you note? Or should I just beg on my knees? I stared right through her. I want a divorce. The entire living room went completely dead. Isabella stared back at me like I had just told the world's most pathetic joke. After a few agonizing seconds, she actually chuckled. Arthur Blake, are you seriously trying to threaten me with a divorce? It is not a threat, I said, my voice dead calm. It's a 2-week notice. Her face instantly darkened into a storm. Is this all because of Philip? I slowly shook my head. No, it's because of you, Isabella. She flinched like I had just slapped her. I didn't stop. Philip was only able to cross the line because you practically held the door open for him. Your parents felt perfectly fine humiliating me because you quietly agreed that I didn't deserve any respect. And your deadbeat brother actually dared to say I was only allowed on that private jet because of you. All because you never once told them what I sacrificed for you, Isabella. I didn't lose my marriage to Philip. I lost it to your endless, suffocating indifference. The absolute rage on her face just froze. For a split second, maybe those words actually pierced whatever was left of her conscience, but she swallowed that tiny flicker of guilt in a heartbeat. Arthur, Do we really need to keep such a petty ledger between husband and wife? Didn't you do all those things for us in the past because you actually loved me? I looked at her, and the bitter irony almost made me choke. Yeah, it was because I loved you. That's exactly why I never kept score back then. But guess what? I just don't love you anymore. Her pupils practically shrank to pinpricks. I brushed right past her, heading straight for the study. Suddenly, Isabella snatched my wrist. What? What did you just say? I slowly glanced down at her trembling hand. I used to live for that touch. Years ago, when she grabbed me like that after a grueling day at the office, she would wrap her arms around me from behind, playfully complaining about my boring healthy soup. She would rest her chin heavily on my shoulder and whisper, "Arthur, thank God I have you. I don't even know when it shifted." But she stopped being thankful. Instead it became, "Stop making a scene," or "Stop being so pathetic," or "Stop embarrassing me." I slowly peeled her fingers off my wrist. I looked her dead in the eye and repeated, I said, "I don't love you anymore." The next morning, her leech of a family showed up at my door, even faster than my legal notice could. I had just finished packing up all my personal documents in the quiet of the study when the doorbell started screaming like a fire alarm. When I cracked it open, there was Margaret front and center, backed up by Richard, Marcus, and a handful of gossiping relatives hungry for a front row seat to the drama. They didn't come for a chat, they came for a firing squad. Margaret shoved her finger right in my face the second she crossed the threshold. "Arthur Blake, you are going to apologize to Isabella this instant, and you will turn the services at the villa back on right now. And you are absolutely not touching Marcus's car." Marcus was standing there with massive bruised bags under his eyes. Clearly, the spoiled brat hadn't slept a wink. "My ride actually got towed last night." Every single person on my social media feed saw it happen. "Arthur, do you have any idea how thoroughly humiliated I am right now?" I stood my ground in the hallway, blocking their path to the living room. "You all barging into my house uninvited? Yeah, that's what I call embarrassing." Margaret just let out a harsh, sarcastic laugh. "Your house? Please. This is the marital home for you and Isabella. She's your wife, and we are your elders, Arthur. How on earth is coming to your house considered uninvited? I didn't even flinch. I just turned my head to lock eyes with Isabella. She was standing near the back of the pack, her eyes completely filled with exhaustion and bitter resentment. "Was this little ambush your bright idea?" I asked her. She wouldn't even give me a straight answer. Instead, she sighed, "Arthur, things have already gotten ugly enough. My mum and the rest of the family just want to fix this." I gave her a slow nod. "All right then, let's fix it." I spun around, marched right into the living room, pulled out the thick folder my lawyer had couriered over last night, and slammed it onto the coffee table. Margaret totally thought I was finally backing down. She crossed her arms and let out a cold, arrogant snort. "See, if only you had done this earlier. Can't a family just talk things out like adults? Why must you always drag our dirty laundry out in public?" Isabella was completely humiliated at the airport yesterday, and instead of supporting her like a real husband, you just kick her while she's down. I ignored the guilt trip and flipped open the very first document, Yunlan Villa, purchased exactly 1 year before my marriage to your precious Isabella. The down payment and the mortgage were both paid exclusively from my personal bank account, and the loan has now been 100% paid off. You all moved in 3 years ago, signed 0 lease agreements, and paid absolutely nothing. Margaret's smug face instantly dropped. "What exactly do you mean by that?" I completely tuned her out and cracked open the second file. 3 straight years of property management, cleaning, private drivers, landscaping, and security fees. The grand total, $1,876,000. The entire room of loud, entitled relatives fell dead silent in a split second. Richard's face completely darkened with panic. "Arthur, what on earth are you bringing all this up for? We are a family. We live together. What's the point of counting every single penny like this? Petty cash, huh?" I smirked and flipped right to the third document. "Uncle Richard, 2 years ago, when your brilliant investment completely tanked, I wiped out $3,200,000 of your debt and backed you with an $8 million guarantee. You swore up and down that the money would be back in my hands within 6 months. Boom. Half the color instantly drained right out of Richard's face. Margaret frantically jumped back in to save him. That was something you chose to do voluntarily. And now you're just bringing it up to settle some petty score? Aren't you just trying to force us to bow our heads to you? I let out a dry chuckle. I'm not forcing anyone to bow their heads. I stared dead into his eyes. I'm just giving you a friendly reminder. Don't blow through my cash while calling me a useless loser behind my back. Marcus stiffened his neck, trying to act tough. Stop acting so high and mighty. You and my sister are married. Your money is my sister's money, isn't it? I slowly turned my gaze to him. Oh, is that how it works? So, does that mean your sister's money is also my money? Marcus was totally stunned, his jaw practically hitting the floor. I didn't waste a second and slid the fourth document right across the table. The supplementary credit card bills you've maxed out over the past 2 years hit a massive $960,000. That includes your endless bar tabs, designer brands, heavily modified sports cars, and VIP private clubs. And guess what? The primary cardholder is me, not Isabella. Marcus looked like a deer caught in the headlights. Suddenly, the rest of the blood-sucking relatives started glaring at him. Someone in the back even muttered, blowing $400,000 to $500,000 a year. That's just way too much. Marcus's face turned beet red. You checked my accounts? It's my credit card. Genius. Of course I can check it. He was completely speechless. Trapped in a corner, Isabella finally snapped. Enough. Her voice was low and soft, but it was practically shaking with suppressed, boiling anger. Arthur Blake, laying all of this out in front of our entire family. Who exactly are you trying to humiliate right now? I slowly looked up, my expression ice cold. Yesterday on the plane, every single one of you watched Philip steal my seat. Not a single person thought that was humiliating to me. But today, I bring out a few honest receipts. And suddenly you feel humiliated. Isabella's face turned completely ghost pale. Margaret jumped right back in, desperate to control the narrative. How is that even remotely the same thing? Philip was doing that for his job. You're just deliberately trying to embarrass us right now. Oh, so embarrassment just depends on the person. I nodded slowly. I get it. When you embarrass me, it's just business. But when I drop the truth on you, it's deliberate revenge. The entire living room fell into an absolutely suffocating dead silence. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. It was my lawyer. He stepped inside wearing a sharp, dark grey suit and carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He walked right past them, looked at me, and gave a respectful nod. Mr. Blake, Isabella stared at him, her brows furrowed in deep confusion. You called a lawyer to the house. The attorney just offered a crisp, professional smile. Miss Hart, I am Mr. Blake's attorney, and I am here today to formally serve you with several legal documents. Without missing a beat, he pulled a massive divorce agreement straight out of his bag. Isabella stared at the bold letters on the front page. Her entire world seemed to crash down in an instant. Margaret frantically lunged forward to snatch it. What divorce agreement? Who on earth gave you permission to get a divorce? The lawyer smoothly dodged her grabbing hands, maintaining that perfectly polite, icy smile. Ma'am, marriage is a matter of personal freedom. It certainly does not require your permission. Margaret was literally shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. The lawyer didn't even blink, carrying right on. The terms of this agreement are crystal clear. All premarital assets belong exclusively to Mr. Blake. Any joint property acquired during the marriage will be split strictly according to the law. Furthermore, if Miss Hart's company is involved in Mr. Blake's personal loans, those will be settled separately based on the signed agreements and bank transfer records. On top of that, all luxury vehicles, real estate properties, and credit card privileges currently being leached by the Hart family members must be surrendered within the specified time frame. Uncle Richard glared, his voice dropping into a dark, threatening growl. You're really going to push this to the absolute extreme, aren't you? The lawyer just looked him dead in the eye and said, Listen, Richard, my lawyer said smoothly. The only one taking things to the extreme is the guy who knows damn well he doesn't own a single thing, yet refuses to hand back the keys. Richard's face drained of all color. Beside him, Isabella picked up the divorce papers, her fingertips turning bone white from her grip. She didn't even flip through the pages. She just stared dead at the cover. After what felt like an eternity, her eyes finally met mine. "Arthur Blake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you really going to go through with this? You're the one who started this mess. Did you ever stop for 1 second to consider how I would feel? That question actually made me freeze for a heartbeat. And then I just laughed out loud. Wow, Isabella. Now you suddenly care about my feelings? Where was this energy yesterday? When you let Philip take my seat right next to you, did you stop to think about how I would feel?" Her lips parted, but she couldn't find a single word. And right on cue, as if sensing the tension, Philip called. Her phone screen lit up, broadcasting the name for everyone in the room to see. Just Philip. Not Secretary Philip, not Philip Wilson, just his first name, plain and intimate. Margaret immediately scrambled to do damage control. "Oh, it's just a business call. Go on, Isabella, pick it up." "Don't let silly drama hold up company business. I just watched my wife." Her finger hovered over the screen, too scared to answer, too guilty to decline. Finally, she swiped to reject it, but the damage was already done. "I didn't even blink." "Continue," I told my lawyer. He nodded, pulling out a fresh document. "Furthermore, Mr. Blake has demanded a full audit of the seat modification records for yesterday's chartered flight," the lawyer announced. "Preliminary digital evidence suggests that Philip Wilson illegally altered the passenger manifest by hijacking Miss Hart's administrative privileges. If subsequent evidence proves he used forged electronic signatures or stole corporate travel resources, we will be handing everything over to the authorities without hesitation." Isabella's head snapped up, panic in her eyes. You're investigating Philip?" I stared her down. "Let me correct you right there. I'm investigating how some secretary stole my seat on a private jet. If your golden boy is innocent, what exactly are you so terrified of?" Isabella choked on her own breath, but her mother Margaret just wouldn't quit. "It's just an airplane seat." "My God, you're making a mountain out of a molehill." "No wonder Isabella doesn't want to get close to you. What woman could stand a petty man like you?" I looked right at her and kept my voice icy calm. "If it's so unbearable, then sign the divorce papers. I'll gladly let her walk." Eventually, the entire Hart family was forcefully escorted out. Well, more accurately, they were thrown out by the heavy-duty security guards downstairs in my building. Margaret shrieked and cursed me out all the way down to the elevator, screaming that I was a heartless monster. She called me an ungrateful parasite, crying that Isabella marrying a loser like me was the greatest blessing my family tree had ever seen. The old me would have been deeply hurt by those words. The new me, I just found all her screaming annoying. After the trash was taken out, Isabella stood frozen in the living room for a long time. The edges of the divorce papers were completely crumpled in her tightly clenched fists. I fully expected her to explode, or mock me, or just rip the contract to shreds. But instead, her voice broke into a soft whisper. Have you been preparing for this for a long time?" I didn't flinch. "No." She looked up, utterly bewildered. "Then how is all your evidence so perfectly complete?" "Because every single time money went out, the bank kept the receipts. Every time a luxury car was registered, the system kept a file. And every time a house was bought, my name was on the contract." I took a breath. "I didn't prepare early. You were just too arrogant. You stood there way too confidently, completely forgetting that none of these things ever belonged to you in the first place." All the remaining color drained from Isabella's face. She opened her mouth to argue, but her phone buzzed like an angry hornet. She just glanced at the screen and let it ring. I'd bet my life it was Philip whining again. Sure enough, just a few minutes later, someone in her company's internal group chat secretly forwarded me a screenshot. "Look, I might not be on Isabella's payroll anymore, but I'm the one who built her network early on, and I know plenty of powerful people. After the total disaster at the airport yesterday, the smart ones already sensed which way the wind was blowing." The screenshot was wild. Philip, playing the victim, had posted a massive sob story in the main executive group chat. "Hey everyone," he wrote. "Please forgive all the chaos today. Miss Hart is going through a really tough time at home. Family drama can be so exhausting. You know how it is when someone lacks a real career of their own. They tend to get paranoid and misinterpret their partner's normal work relationships. I just pray this won't damage your trust in Miss Hart. Wow. The replies were just as pathetic. Hang in there, Philip, one kiss-ass wrote. Miss Hart is such a warrior. It's so unfair when unsupportive family makes work a total nightmare. But the most glaring part? Her idiot brother Marcus had somehow weaseled his way into the executive chat just to post. Honestly, guys, my brother-in-law is just a pathetic freeloader. He's been leeching off my sister for years, and now the clown actually takes himself seriously. If the flight crew hadn't taken pity on him yesterday, that loser wouldn't even be allowed to touch the door of a private jet. I read those messages and just smirked. My lawyer asked how I wanted to handle it. I simply forwarded him the screenshot. Save this for evidence, I typed. He didn't reply right away, but I wasn't in any rush. See, the one thing arrogant rats like him fear the most isn't a quick clapback, it's letting them talk. Give them enough rope and they'll always hang themselves. The more they said, the better. Right at 12 o'clock, Captain Collins came through, sending over the unfiltered, classified background records for the entire trip. Philip didn't just steal my seat. Oh no. The little parasite actually labeled himself as Miss Hart's quote-unquote accompanying family and reception, demanding the exact same VIP service I paid for, including exclusive 5-star meals, a luxurious 4-person rest cabin, and VIP dibs on the best hotel suite the second we arrived. But here's the real kicker. He took the island's master suite, the one booked specifically for me, and slapped his own name on it, dumping me in a basic guest room. I just stared at that guest list, letting the disrespect sink in. This wasn't some last-minute mix-up. It was cold-blooded and calculated. The guy wasn't just trying to steal my seat. He was trying to replace me entirely. At 3 in the afternoon, Isabella finally knocked on my study door, clutching her phone. She looked way calmer than she did this morning. I just talked to Philip, she said. He told me the seating arrangements were adjusted by the admin team. It wasn't targeting you at all. And the suite? That was just for work convenience. He needs to go over materials with me at any given moment. I stared back at my own wife, and suddenly I just wanted to burst out laughing. And you actually believed him? I asked. She frowned. He has no reason to lie to me. Oh, but I have a reason to lie to you? I shot back. Dead silence. I slammed the printed back-end system logs right in front of her. See for yourself. Isabella looked down. At first, her face stayed perfectly neutral, but the second her eyes hit the tags for accompanying family members and the manual override for the master suite, her fingers went totally stiff. I leaned in. Is this for work too? Not a single word from her. I didn't let up. Philip stole my seat for work, hijacked my VIP reception for work, and claimed my luxury suite for work. Isabella, your company must be insanely demanding. If your secretary has to step in and play the president's husband. Her face contorted into an ugly scowl. Arthur, don't be so harsh, she snapped. I leaned back in my chair. Harsh? Is it harsher than your entire team saying in the group chat that I'm just a deadbeat living off a woman? Isabella blinked, totally taken aback. What group chat? I pulled up the screenshot and shoved the screen right in her face. As she read through the messages, her expression turned absolutely freezing. Not because her husband was being ripped apart, mind you, but because this kind of vicious gossip could mess with her company's precious stability. Man, I knew her way too well. Right on cue, her very first reaction was, "Who sent you a screenshot of my company's private chat?" I looked at her, way too exhausted to even muster up one last sarcastic comeback. Isabella, you really are something else. She instantly realized she had messed up and pressed her lips tight. That's not what I meant, she stammered. Oh, it absolutely is. I slammed my laptop shut. In your head, my humiliation means absolutely nothing. All you care about is who leaked the screenshot. Who dared to embarrass you? Who challenged the great Miss Hart's authority? A genuine flicker of panic finally cracked her perfect mask. Arthur, I just don't explain. I stood up sharply. Save your breath for the lawyers. At exactly 6 in the evening, my lawyer fired off a formal legal notice straight to the Isabella Corporation. The demands were brutal and straight to the point. Philip Wilson was officially accused of unauthorized tampering with private VIP itineraries, faking authorization, and blatantly violating Arthur Black's personal rights. The company was legally cornered. They had to hand over all back-end system logs, every single approval process, all relevant chat logs, and a highly detailed breakdown of the travel budget. Within 30 minutes of that letter dropping, the company group chat went absolutely nuclear. The exact same cowards who were calling me a freeloader just an hour ago were suddenly panic deleting their messages. Then Philip called me. I picked up. Let's just say his voice wasn't nearly as cocky as it was back on the plane. "Mr. Blake, there's really no need to drag lawyers into this, is there?" I casually put him on speakerphone, nodding at my lawyer sitting right next to me to listen in. I smirked into the mic. "What's wrong, Philip? Are you scared?" He paused for a beat, then actually forced a laugh. "What do I have to be afraid of? I just think that as Miss Hart's husband, you really shouldn't be bringing your petty personal emotions into her company affairs. Miss Hart has bled for this company to get where she is today. Pulling a stunt like this, it's only going to hurt her. Oh? And yesterday, when you smugly sat in my seat, did it ever cross your mind that it might hurt her marriage?" His tone instantly dropped a few degrees. "Mr. Blake, that seat arrangement was tacitly approved by Miss Hart herself. If you've got an issue with it, take it up with your wife. Don't target me." I raised an eyebrow. "Ah, there it is, finally showing your true colors, huh? Oh, don't you worry," I chuckled darkly. "I'll definitely be having a chat with her about that too." Philip let out a quiet breath, clearly thinking he'd successfully thrown Isabella under the bus. But before he could celebrate, I cut in. "However, as for your little stunt forging my authorization, hijacking my VIP reception rights, and illegally altering the hotel suite list, yeah, we're going to investigate that part first." The breathing on the other end of the line completely stopped. I didn't forge anything." "Then sit tight and wait for the evidence," I snapped, instantly hanging up the phone. My lawyer gave me a very meaningful smile. "This little secretary is a bit sharper than your wife," he noted. "He knows exactly when to cut his losses and shift the blame." I just stared down at my phone screen. "Being smart doesn't mean a thing when you're this greedy," I muttered. "A leech who tries to crawl into someone else's marriage is never satisfied with just a taste. If he took my seat, he's definitely stolen a whole lot more. And my job now? I'm going to squeeze him until he spits out every single thing he swallowed, piece by painful piece." But of course, Isabella was never the type to just roll over and give up. Even after the private charter was cancelled, she had the absolute nerve to post a picture of the sky on her social media that very same day. The caption, "Plans changed at the last minute, but the view never disappoints." She didn't even take that picture, she just dug it out of some dusty old album. I knew the truth, because I was the one who snapped that shot 2 years ago. We were on our trip to the South Island, and right after I took it, she dozed off, resting her head on my shoulder. When she finally woke up, she looked at me and whispered, "Arthur, one day, I'm going to fly my entire family out on my very own private jet." I just smiled and said, "All right." Back then, she had no clue that every single private jet she later bragged about booking on her own was actually funded by me. Desperate to salvage the massive hit to her ego at the airport yesterday, Isabella scrambled to throw together a second event. She dragged everyone originally heading to the island out to a downtown 5-star hotel, playing it off as some sort of belated celebration banquet. Naturally, my invitation got mysteriously lost in the mail this time, but I showed up anyway, and I wasn't there for the free food. I came to take back what was mine. By 7 o'clock that evening, the grand banquet hall of the Cloud Top Hotel was practically glowing. Isabella was holding court at the entrance, flashing that fake, composed smile of hers. She had slipped into this sleek, long black dress. oozing absolute confidence, acting like that total train wreck at the airport yesterday was just a collective hallucination. Her pet secretary, Philip, was glued to her side, sharply dressed in a tailored suit. He kept a careful distance, yet hovered in this weirdly intimate grey area, definitely not acting like a regular employee, but not quite a stranger either. I noticed a whole bunch of the Hart family relatives had already shown up. The second Margaret spotted me, her face twisted in disgust. "What the hell are you doing here? Isabella never invited you." I replied calmly, "I'm just here to wrap up some business." Hearing this, Marcus scoffed, stepping up to sneer at me. "Oh, don't tell me you're getting cold feet," and came crawling back to beg my sister for a handout. I let my eyes drop to his suspiciously bare wrist. The guy used to absolutely live in that luxury watch I bought for him, but today, nothing. I'm guessing that after my lawyer's little letter arrived, it finally clicked that I was the one who paid for it, and he was suddenly too terrified to flex it. Rushing right past him, I strolled inside. The banquet hall was absolutely packed to the brim. Corporate bigwigs, business partners, and every last leech from the Hart family tree was there. Isabella was obviously using this lavish dinner to prove to the world that she was totally unbothered. Philip even had the nerve to strut up on stage, wineglass in hand, to deliver the opening speech on her behalf. Due to some unforeseen personal drama, our originally scheduled island getaway had to be temporarily put on hold. On behalf of Miss Hart, I sincerely apologize for any minor inconveniences this may have caused you all. Miss Hart always says, our company's success is built on the team, not dragged down by any one person's bitter emotions. Right as he said one person's bitter emotions, his smug eyes flicked straight to me. A few muffled snickers echoed through the hall. Margaret, lounging at the VIP table, purposely raised her voice so the whole room could hear. Honestly, some insecure men just can't handle seeing a woman thrive. When their wives hit the big leagues and they're completely useless, all they do is try to drag them down. Richard shook his head, sighing dramatically. Such a tragic family embarrassment. Meanwhile, Isabella stood near the stage, not lifting a finger to stop them, just staring at me with this intense, complicated look, like she was holding her breath waiting for me to absolutely lose my mind. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. I just claimed a random chair near the back doors, kicked back, and took a slow sip of my tea. Seeing that I couldn't care less, a flash of bitter frustration crossed Philip's face, but he forced himself to carry on. But please, rest assured. Everything for tonight is locked in. The Cloudtop Hotel will be treating us to their absolute highest tier of luxury service. Miss Hart once told me that truly strong leaders never let a petty little setback keep them down. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Isabella finally glided onto the stage. She grabbed the microphone, her tone sickeningly sweet and steady. "Thank you all so much for standing by me through all this. I really don't want to waste our time hashing out the messy details of yesterday's little hiccup. Balancing family drama and a massive career is never easy, but I firmly believe time reveals the truth." She shot me an icy glare, and I truly hope a certain someone finally understands that. You can't force respect through petty pressure. I calmly set my teacup down. Right on cue, the massive double doors of the banquet hall swung wide open. The general manager of the Cloudtop Hotel marched straight in, flanked by two serious-looking staff members. He strutted right up to the front, offered Isabella a stiff, polite bow, and cleared his throat. "Miss Hart, I deeply apologize for interrupting your lovely evening. However, there are a few premium services that urgently need reconfirming." Isabella scowled, clearly annoyed. "What on earth is it?" The manager smoothly handed her a printed bill. "Right now, you are utilizing the exclusive banquet hall privileges strictly reserved for our Blue Star Black Gold Elite members. The sole account holder for this ultra-premium tier is Mr. Arthur Blake. Exactly 30 minutes ago, our system received an official alert. Mr. Blake has permanently revoked all family and guest authorizations for you and your entire party. You could hear a pin drop in that banquet hall. Every single pair of eyes in the room instantly snapped to me. The smug little smile on Isabella's face completely shattered. Philip panicked and jumped right in. Look, we can just put the expenses on the company card. Keep the service going. The general manager offered a painfully polite smile. Of course, sir. That is absolutely an option. However, the grand hall rental, the imported beverages, the private chef services, and the VIP suites were all waived under the Black Gold account. If you wish to downgrade to a standard business dinner, tonight's entire bill must be paid up front, in full. Philip's face completely drained of color. Wait, didn't our administration team already put down a huge deposit? The general manager gave him a deadpan stare. Mr. Philip, what the administration submitted is a request to deduct membership points, not a cash payment. Margaret shot up from her chair, her face flushed with indignation. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Are you seriously implying our Isabella can't foot the bill? The general manager kept his cool, dripping with professional politeness. Ma'am, that's not what I meant at all. It's just that our system shows tonight's estimated tab comes to 136 million. May I ask who will be settling this massive bill? The entire banquet hall went dead silent. You could literally hear a pin drop. Those snobby relatives who had been mocking me just seconds ago instantly muted. Several corporate executives nervously stared down at their phones, furiously calculating if the company could somehow write off this ridiculous expense. Isabella gripped the microphone so tight her knuckles turned bone white. She shot a desperate glance at me, and for the very first time raw, undeniable panic flashed in her eyes. I just stood there in cold silence, but the general manager confidently marched right up to me and offered a deep, respectful bow. Mr. Blake, would you like us to reserve the VIP private box for you this evening? I met his gaze and replied with absolute calm, no need. And as for this little banquet, I locked eyes with Isabella, who was trembling up on the stage. Just yesterday on the plane, this very woman had banished me to the back row, and today, at her grand banquet, she proudly let that scumbag Philip kick off the celebration for her. She arrogantly assumed that with her family and executives watching, I would play the good little husband, swoop in at the last second, pay the massive bill, and save her face. I turned back to the manager. Whoever throws the party pays the bill. The general manager gave a knowing nod. Understood, sir. Isabella finally couldn't hold it back anymore. Arthur Blake, do you really have to be such a jerk about this? I slowly rose from my seat. Miss Hart, isn't this supposed to be your glorious celebration banquet? I scanned the stunned room, my voice barely above a whisper, yet slicing through the silence for every single person to hear. Since all of you love to claim that I'm just a useless leech living off women, then I guess I won't be eating tonight's dinner. As I casually strolled toward the exit, Margaret's furious screech echoed behind me. Isabella, fine, we'll pay the damn bill. Does the mighty Hart family have anything to fear from him? But literally a few minutes later, just as I stepped out of the Grand Hotel entrance, my phone buzzed with a quick text from my lawyer. Isabella had only scraped together a measly deposit of $300,000. The lavish banquet was instantly downgraded, the master chef was booted, the premium drinks were entirely cancelled, and her luxury suite was abruptly revoked. I cast a cool glance back at the towering, brightly lit hotel. Wow, that second brutal public slap in the face came way faster than I ever expected. And the best part, I hadn't even lifted a single finger this time. All I did was stop opening my wallet for her. Her glamorous banquet that night quickly turned into an absolute laughingstock. Those top-shelf imported drinks were ruthlessly swapped out. The exclusive chef's menu was downgraded to a cheap standard business meal. And they even paused the food service halfway through because her deposit came up short. But the ultimate embarrassment? Several key business partners awkwardly walked out early, and it wasn't because they couldn't stomach the cheap food. They bailed because they had finally seen right through her facade. Isabella's so-called high-end connections and elite resources weren't actually hers at all. By the very next day, the juicy gossip from the Cloud Top Hotel was spreading like wildfire through the entire company. Whispers went around that Isabella's marriage was on the rocks. Others blatantly gossiped that her boy toy Philip had finally crossed a major line and completely pissed off her legitimate, powerful husband. Some nosy co-workers even dug up old rumors, suggesting the only reason Isabella's startup quickly locked down elite corporate travel deals was all thanks to a mysterious, heavy-hitting benefactor secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. Isabella didn't even dare to show her face at home for the entire day. It wasn't until 10 o'clock at night that she finally pushed the front door open. She reeked of cheap alcohol, her face was deathly pale, and her bloodshot eyes looked totally exhausted. I was casually chilling in the study, packing up the very last of my personal belongings. She froze at the doorway, staring blankly at my half-empty bookshelf, her voice trembling. "Are you seriously moving out?" "Yep." "Moving where?" "Honestly, that's none of your damn business." She heavily leaned against the doorframe, looking as if those words had literally stabbed her in the chest. For the past 3 years, I had loyally reported my every move, even if I was just running downstairs to grab some groceries. I would always sweetly ask if she wanted me to bring her back a fresh coffee. Now, she was finally choking down the bitter taste of being entirely shut out of my life. She slowly walked in, murmuring in a defeated tone, "About last night. I really didn't expect things to blow up like that." I completely ignored her and kept tossing my documents into the cardboard box while she frantically stammered, "I didn't know. I didn't realize the VIP perks at Cloudtop actually belong to you too." I stopped packing, slowly looked up, and shot her a deadpan stare. "Oh, so if you had known, you wouldn't have publicly humiliated me and put me in that totally awkward spot." Isabella's throat noticeably bobbed as she swallowed hard. I glared right through her and snapped. "So, you don't even think you did anything wrong, do you? You're just regretting that you didn't calculate the massive financial cost." Her pale face turned practically translucent. "Arthur, okay, I admit it. I handled the whole airplane seating thing terribly. Philip stole your seat. I really should have forced him to get his ass up." Wow, that was literally the very first time she had ever admitted fault. And yet, I felt absolutely nothing, not even a single tiny ripple of emotion in my deadened heart. "It's not about whether you should have made him get up," I coldly replied. "From the very beginning, he never should have been allowed to sit there." Isabella's eyes welled up with frantic tears. "Then what the hell do you want from me? To fire him? Fine, I can do it right now." I just smirked. Finally, the pathetic punchline had arrived. She genuinely believed that Philip was the only problem here. She actually thought that by simply tossing that loser aside, I would come crawling right back to her like a loyal dog. "Isabella, are you seriously trying to negotiate terms with me at a time like this?" Her panic visibly spiked. "I'm not negotiating. I'm just desperately trying to fix the problem. It can't be fixed." I snapped the suitcase completely shut. "Because the real problem isn't that Philip took my seat. The problem is that you gladly let him take it." She froze like a deer in headlights. Without missing a beat, I picked up the divorce papers from the desk and shoved them right into her trembling hands. "Just sign it." She stared at the divorce papers, and finally, the tears started falling. I rarely ever saw Isabella cry. She had always been so fiercely proud and strong-willed. Even during the company's absolute darkest days, she would just get red in the eyes and bulldog her way through the plans. She refused to shed a single tear in front of anyone else. God, my heart used to break for her the most in those vulnerable moments. But right now, I just feel a total sense of estrangement. She didn't reach for the agreement. Instead, she looked up and asked, 3 years of marriage, do you really have absolutely no attachment left?" I stayed quiet for a second. Of course, I had attachment. A tiny spark of hope flashed through her eyes, but then I cut her off. Up until yesterday, yeah, I had cherished every single second of it. The hope in her eyes instantly died. Isabella slowly slumped back into her chair, burying her face in both hands. "I am just so exhausted. There is just so much going on at the company. So many massive expectations at home, and I am being pushed to my absolute breaking point every single day. Philip actually helps me a lot. He totally understands my work rhythm, not like you, always nagging about when I will be home, if I have eaten dinner, or why I am staying up late again." I just stared at her. Wow. So, in my own wife's eyes, my genuine concern was nothing but a heavy burden, and her assistant Philip kissing up to her was somehow true understanding. Well, since he understands you so perfectly, let him keep walking forward with you. She shot up, tears pouring down her cheeks. "Do you really have to be so cruel?" she choked out. "Hey, I am just following your lead." She was left totally speechless, but right on cue her phone buzzed. Of course, it was Philip again. This time, I didn't look away. I glanced right at the screen for her as a text notification popped up. "Miss Hart, please do not be too upset. Mr. Blake is just using his connections to throw a tantrum and pressure you into backing down. No matter what happens, I will always stand by you." I read the message, and a bitter, mocking smile crept onto my face. Isabella's face flushed with pure panic as she frantically tried to lock the screen, but it was way too late. "Stand by you, huh?" I muttered softly. "How sweet." She stumbled over her words. I didn't even reply to him. Does it even matter anymore? I grabbed my suitcase and headed straight for the door. Isabella chased after me. "Arthur Blake, do you seriously have to walk out tonight?" I froze right at the doorway. Her voice was shaking like a leaf. "If you walk out that door right now, there will truly be no turning back." I slowly turned to look at her. "Isabella, I gave you all the space in the world. You never once gave me an inch." All the color instantly drained from her face. The moment the heavy door clicked shut, I could hear her sobbing my name from the inside. I didn't even glance back. Downstairs, my lawyer's sleek sedan was idling by the curb. I tossed my suitcase in the trunk, and he took a long look at the glowing window upstairs. "Actually leaving, huh? Getting soft-hearted?" he asked. I slid into the passenger seat. Not a chance. The engine purred as we sped away from the upscale neighborhood. I stared into the rearview mirror. The massive house I had called home for 3 whole years was slowly fading into the distance, getting smaller and smaller. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Leaving wasn't nearly as painful as I thought it would be. The real torture was being forced, time and time again, to swallow her cold indifference. But that pain is dead and gone now. All that is left is total, icy clarity. Almost immediately, Isabella started blowing up my phone. We are talking non-stop phone calls, endless text messages, WeChat notifications, lengthy emails, and even sending our mutual friends to pass along her pathetic messages. She completely dropped that bossy tone she used on day one. She stopped demanding I come home and totally stopped accusing me of throwing a childish tantrum. Instead, she was practically begging. "I am so sorry, Arthur. I was completely wrong on the plane that day. I have already suspended Philip. Please, do not take what my mum and the others said to heart. Can we just meet up and talk this out face to face?" I left every single message on read. Because I knew the truth. She hadn't magically learned to cherish me overnight. She was just terrified because she finally realized that I actually had the guts to walk away. And even worse for her, she realized that without me, her perfect little empire was starting to crumble to dust. Meanwhile, my lawyer's deep dive brought back massive results. Philip's dirty laundry was way worse than I had ever anticipated. The guy was a total parasite. It wasn't just him secretly messing with the private flight manifests and upgrading hotel suites without authorization. He had also been repeatedly milking the company for sky-high business travel reimbursements, hiding it all under the excuse of a special reception accompanying Miss Hart. In the past 12 months alone, there were dozens of times Isabella wasn't even on a business trip. Yet this clown used corporate funds to book 5-star hotels, first-class flights, and private luxury transfers. But here is the real kicker. A huge chunk of those perks were pulled directly from my own family's exclusive VIP authorizations, meaning this snake was burning through my cash, sleeping in my luxury suites, all while trashing me in the company group chats as some pathetic gold digger who lived off his wife. My lawyer slammed the thick stack of documents onto the desk, an icy smirk on his face. This piece of trash has some serious nerve. I flipped through the massive pile of credit card statements, and my eyes locked onto one specific luxury purchase, a men's diamond brooch for $18,000. The memo on the receipt read, "Corporate gift from Miss Hart." My blood boiled as I remembered that exact same brooch sparkling on Philip's suit lapel at Isabella's birthday bash just last month. Someone had gushed over how nice it looked, and he just smirked, saying it was a gift from a very special someone. And Isabella? She didn't even try to deny it. I was sitting right next to her at that table, treated like a complete outcast. But looking at the cold, hard proof right now, I felt absolutely nothing. My lawyer raised an eyebrow. Do you want me to fire all this over to Isabella directly? Send it. Every last damn page. Later that evening, Isabella finally tracked me down at the private club on her own. She looked like an absolute wreck. Zero makeup, dark bags under her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was a tangled mess. Security didn't bounce her because I had tipped them off earlier to let her straight up when she arrived. But make no mistake, it wasn't because I actually wanted to see her. I needed her to see it. I wanted her to witness, with her very own eyes, exactly what kind of snake she had been protecting this whole time. The second she stepped into the private room, she blurted out, Are those documents real? I just sat back on the sofa and lazily pointed at the table. Why don't you check them yourself? I replied. She grabbed the files, flipping through them, page by agonizing page. At first, she tried to play it cool, but the deeper she went, the more violently her hands began to shake. This can't be real, she murmured, her voice cracking. Philip would never do something like this. The lawyer sitting next to her chimed in, his tone ice-cold and professional. Miss Hart, every single expense record, approval process, login device, and hotel check-in has been thoroughly verified. If you still doubt it, we can always call the cops. Isabella shot her eyes up to look at me. When did you even look into this? From the very moment he dared to sit in my seat, I replied. Her lips quivered. So, you knew he was bad news this entire time, and you didn't even warn me? I almost burst out laughing right then and there. Isabella, how many times did I warn you to set some boundaries, to run background checks on your inner circle? I told you not to hand over your personal passwords to a secretary. But did you ever listen to a word I said? Of course, she hadn't. She just thought I was being a petty, jealous husband who didn't understand her precious career. But now, with the cold, hard proof slapping her right in the face, she magically remembers all my warnings. Suddenly, the private room doors swung wide open. Hotel security dragged Philip inside. He clearly had no clue Isabella was waiting for him. The second, he stepped in and locked eyes with the damning files on the table. The color drained from his face. Miss Hart? Isabella shot to her feet, her voice trembling with sheer rage. Did you do all of this? Philip's eyes darted around the room. What do you mean? She slammed the heavy stack of documents right into his chest, altering the guest list without permission, faking expense reports, abusing your clearance. And these hotel check-in records. Philip Wilson, tell me right now, did you do this or not? Papers scattered wildly across the floor. Philip looked like he'd seen a ghost. Yet he still desperately tried to save his own skin. Miss Hart, I swear, I did it all for the company. Some of those VIP receptions needed early coordination. I just took a shortcut to get things done faster. A shortcut? A shortcut convenient enough to replace my husband's position with yours. Isabella finally screamed at the top of her lungs. Philip froze dead in his tracks. He definitely hadn't expected Isabella to openly claim me as her husband right to his face. A few tense seconds ticked by before Philip suddenly snapped his head toward me, venom dripping from his eyes. Arthur Blake, you're nothing but a rich kid riding on your family's coattails. What the hell is so great about you, huh? Miss Hart built her empire from the ground up. Who do you think you are, trying to steal all the glory? I just stared at him, completely unbothered. I never tried to take any credit. You two were the ones constantly calling me useless. That instantly shut him up. My lawyer calmly broke the silence. Mr. Philip, regarding your suspected embezzlement of company funds and the blatant forgery of executive authorization, we highly suggest you save your pathetic excuses for the police. Absolute panic washed over Philip's face as he whipped his head back toward Isabella. Miss Hart, please, you can't do this to me. I've been grinding by your side for years. Doesn't my loyalty mean anything to you? You knew about those padded expense reports. You silently gave me the green light to use those perks. Isabella turned ghostly pale. What? When did I ever tell you to fake reimbursement claims? Philip let out a bitter, ugly sneer. Oh, so you're throwing me under the bus now, Isabella Hart. Don't you dare forget about all those private business trips we took. Everyone in the industry knows I'm your most trusted confidant. You were the one who practically handed me Arthur Blake's place. You're the one who let me take his seat on that plane. But now that the ship is sinking, you're playing the innocent victim. His desperate, venomous words cut her way deeper than any paper evidence ever could. Isabella swayed on her feet, looking like she might faint. I just sat there, watching her without an ounce of pity. She had sharpened this very blade by indulging him, and now it was swinging back to slice her open. She totally deserved it. Philip tried to keep yelling, but my lawyer quickly cut him off. The messy dynamic between you two can be sorted out later. However, Mr. Blake, as the actual victim of your fraud, is pressing full charges. Real fear finally flashed in Philip's eyes. Mr. Blake, I'm sorry, I can apologize. I'll pay back every single cent. And I was wrong to take your seat. I had a momentary lapse in judgment. I slowly stood up. No, you didn't. I walked right up to him, staring dead into his terrified eyes. You just assumed I was too weak to fight back. All the remaining color drained from his pathetic face. I turned back to my lawyer. Call the cops! Isabella suddenly snapped her head toward me. Arthur, wait, I already knew she was about to beg for mercy. She didn't give a damn about Philip. She was just terrified of the humiliation she'd face once he was dragged away in handcuffs. The world was about to find out that she had let her boy-toy secretary walk all over her. Her chaotic management, the blatant misuse of company resources, none of it could be swept under the rug anymore. But I wasn't about to give her the floor, Isabella. I am not covering for your messes this time. Her eyes instantly welled up with red-hot tears. The police arrived in record time. As they slapped the cuffs on Philip and dragged him out, he kept screaming her name, like a madman. Miss Hart, save me! Please, you can't let them lock me up! Isabella just stood there, paralyzed, her face as white as a ghost. She didn't move a single muscle. Once the heavy doors finally clicked shut, she slowly collapsed to her knees, numbly picking up the scattered papers, one by one. It was as if she was trying to gather the shattered pieces of her ruined dignity. I coldly walked right past her, but suddenly she grabbed my pant leg, her voice completely broken and so unlike her usual arrogant self. Arthur Blake, I was so wrong. I stopped dead in my tracks. She looks up at me, thick, heavy tears rolling down her cheeks. I was really, truly wrong. I stared down at her, slowly and deliberately pulling my leg away from her grasp. If you made a mistake, then you need to own the consequences. Don't sit here and beg me. Fast forward exactly 1 week to the courthouse. Isabella showed up a solid 30 minutes early for our divorce appointment. She was dressed in a plain white shirt, looking totally exhausted with deep, dark bags under her eyes. It was painfully obvious that life had been absolute hell for her ever since her precious Philip got dragged away by the cops. Meanwhile, her company had completely gone up in flames. Philip's fake expense reports had exposed a massive chain of shady corporate approvals. Every single admin and finance worker who was buddy-buddy with him, suspended, effective immediately. The higher-ups were seriously questioning Isabella's ability to run the place, and furious partners were pulling the plug on major projects left and right. And as for her precious Hart family, well, you can probably guess. They were given a strict deadline to pack their bags and get the hell out of Yunlon Villa. The second I pulled my guarantee on her dad's massive debts, the repo guys took all their fancy cars, and angry creditors were practically kicking their front door down. Her mother, Margaret, had blown up my phone dozens of times over the past few days. I didn't answer a single one of them. When Isabella spotted me walking into the lobby with my lawyer, she quickly stood up. Arthur, she muttered. Her voice was incredibly soft and completely drained. I just gave her a cold, barely there nod. Of course, Margaret was there too. She was sitting on a nearby bench, somehow looking even worse than her daughter. The second she saw me, she leaped to her feet. Choking back her absolute rage, she spat. Arthur Blake, Today is just about you and Isabella. We really shouldn't be getting involved, but after all the years you two spent together, do you really have to be this ruthless? Fine, get a divorce, but you should at least leave us the luxury villa to live in, shouldn't you? And that financial guarantee for your Uncle Richard, you just yanked it away with zero warning. You've got debt collectors harassing us every single day. What? Are you trying to drive us to our graves? But before I even had to open my mouth, my lawyer flashed a polite, icy smile. Mrs. Margaret, the villa is absolutely not marital property, nor does it belong to you. Frankly, Mr. Blake giving you an entire week to process the move out was a massive act of charity. Margaret's face turned completely black. What the hell does a stuck-up lawyer know about human decency? Our Isabella gave him 3 whole years of her life. 3 years of a woman's prime is surely worth way more than just some stupid house. I slowly turned to look at her. She was with me for 3 years, sure. But I was with her for 3 years too. If we're slapping a price tag on our youth, shouldn't my time count just as much? That choked Margaret up instantly. Her face turned bright purple as she snapped her head toward Isabella. Well, say something. Are you just going to stand there and let him bully your own parents? Isabella just kept her head glued to the floor, dead silent. Margaret started panicking. Isabella. Finally, Isabella lifted her head. Mom, just stop it. Margaret froze in her tracks. What did you just say to me? Isabella squeezed her eyes shut. The villa, it was never ours to begin with. Margaret looked at her like she had lost her mind. Are you insane? Where the hell are we supposed to live? Your father's creditors are literally camped at our doorstep. Your car is gone, your business is tanking, and you are actually taking his side right now. She was screaming so loud that everyone else in the lobby stopped what they were doing and stared. Margaret clearly realized she was making a massive public scene, but she was too worked up to stop herself. Arthur Blake, are you even a real man? You married my daughter, which means it is your duty to take care of this entire family. Back when you were eating at the Hart family dinner table, I never once let you go hungry. I just smiled. Wow, Aunt Margaret. A luxury villa, 3 luxury cars, and millions of dollars in debt relief. All in exchange for a few extra scoops of mashed potatoes. Gee, I guess I really did get the better end of that deal. A random guy standing nearby couldn't hold back a loud snort of laughter. Margaret's face flushed a violent shade of red. This was the 3rd time she had been totally humiliated in public. Not at some airport, not at a fancy hotel, but right in the middle of a crowded courthouse lobby. She always loved throwing her weight around and acting like a superior elder, but now, effortlessly exposed by just a few sarcastic words in front of total strangers, her disgusting greed was laid bare for everyone to see. Isabella was practically dying of embarrassment. She dropped her voice to a whisper. Mom, you should go home first. I'm not going back right now. I am not going anywhere. Margaret shrieked. If I don't get a proper explanation today, I am not moving a single inch from this spot. My lawyer calmly pulled out a thick document. Mrs. Margaret, if you continue to disrupt these legal divorce proceedings, we will have no choice but to have courthouse security physically remove you. Furthermore, regarding the heavy expenses caused by your long-term, unauthorized use of Mr. Blake's private property and vehicles, we will be forced to sue you for full compensation to the maximum extent of the law. Margaret snapped her mouth shut instantly. She was never afraid of a screaming match, but the sheer threat of having to actually pay out of her own pocket absolutely terrified her. Right on cue, Richard came rushing into the lobby. He looked 10 years older than he did just a few days ago, his expensive suit completely wrinkled and his forehead dripping with sweat. The second he reached us, he grabbed my arm. Arthur, please, let's just talk. I easily dodged his grip. Uncle Richard, if you have something to discuss, talk to my lawyer. His face instantly darkened. Do you really have to be this cold? You two are getting divorced soon anyway. Let's just settle what needs to be discussed like adults. A nervous twitch formed at the corner of Richard's mouth as he dropped his voice to a frantic whisper. Listen, you can't just withdraw that financial guarantee. The debt collectors are already swarming our house. Margaret was so terrified she couldn't sleep a wink last night. Just, for Isabella's sake, help your uncle out. Just this one last time. Uncle Richard, I stared right through him. 2 years ago, you also said, just this once. His face completely froze. Back then, you swore you'd pay me back within 6 months, I pressed on. Did you ever? He stammered, his confidence crumbling. You know how tough things are at home? No, I don't. I cut him off cold. All I know is from today onward, your massive debts have absolutely nothing to do with me. The pitiful act finally dropped. Richard gritted his teeth and snarled, Arthur Blake, don't you forget, you and Isabella aren't officially divorced yet. Husband and wife are one entity. If you push us over the edge, your precious reputation is going down with us. My lawyer just let out a light chuckle. Mr. Richard, rest assured, Mr. Blake's reputation is perfectly spotless. As for you, repeatedly harassing your soon-to-be ex-son-in-law to shoulder your personal financial mess, well, if word gets out, it's not going to sound very pretty. Richard's face turned completely ashen. Out of nowhere, Isabella finally spoke up. Dad, just stop begging him. Richard snapped his head toward her in disbelief. Isabella. Her eyes were rimmed red, but the tears wouldn't fall. This is what we owe him. A dead silence fell over the Hart family. I shot Isabella a passing glance. Honestly, if she had said those exact words a little earlier, maybe, just maybe, my heart would have softened. But now, it was nothing more than a pathetic, belated awakening. At the Civil Affairs Bureau, the clerk went through the usual motions. Is this divorce voluntary for both parties? Isabella looked up at me, a final desperate flicker of struggle in her eyes. I stared back, completely unfazed. Yes, entirely voluntary. The clerk shifted her gaze to Isabella. Isabella gripped the pen, her hand trembling, hesitating to sign her name. I didn't rush her. I just waited. A few agonizing seconds later, she whispered, voluntary. The scratch of the pen on the paper was so soft, yet it sounded like something heavy shattering for good. Stepping out of the building, the afternoon sunlight was blindingly beautiful. Isabella lingered on the steps, her voice suddenly calling out to my back. Arthur Blake! I stopped and turned around. The tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over. If I had forced Philip to give up his seat on the plane that day, would you still have left me? I just looked at her. It was a hell of a question to ask when it was already way too late. There are no ifs here, I told her flatly, because someone who actually respected me as a husband would never have let that happen in the first place. All the color drained from her face. Without another word, I turned my back and walked away. Behind me, I heard her mother, Margaret, finally break down into ugly sobs. It's over. It's all over. Yes, it was finally over, but that was their ending, not my beginning. 3 days after the ink dried on my divorce papers, the investigation into Philip finally dropped. And oh boy, it was a goldmine. Fake expense reports, forged executive approvals, unauthorized power grabs, and straight-up skimming company assets. The grand total? Definitely not chump change, but the absolute kicker. In a desperate scramble to save his own skin, the idiot handed over a massive pile of his private chat logs. And in those logs, it turned out, even though Isabella hadn't directly ordered him to commit fraud, she turned a blind eye and practically greenlit his every single transgression. Like the time he shamelessly asked, should we adjust Mr. Blake's seating? Having him sit next to you might disrupt your workflow. And Isabella's cold response? Arrange it however you see fit. Just don't make it too painfully obvious. Or when he pushed his luck, asking, if we give the master suite to Mr. Blake, it's going to make reviewing those late-night documents really inconvenient. Her answer? Then prioritize the work. And then there was that late-night text he sent, dripping with fake concern. Miss Hart, I think Mr. Blake might have misunderstood our dynamic today. Her reply was a brutal slap to the face. Don't mind him. He's always like that. He's always like this. Reading those exact words, I'm not gonna lie, my chest still stung a little. But it wasn't because I was still secretly in love with her. I just felt incredibly sorry for the past version of myself, the guy who swallowed his pride and suppressed his feelings time and time again. So every time she broke my heart, to her, it was just me always being like this. My lawyer looked up from the files, asking if I wanted to include these chat logs in our litigation materials. I didn't even blink. Absolutely. Because even though the divorce was stamped and sealed, the messy property settlement was still wide open. This toxic trail of evidence was more than enough to prove she knowingly let another man trample all over my rights while we were still married. It perfectly justified exactly why I was clawing back every expensive gift and demanding massive financial compensation. It didn't take long for Isabella to see those exposed chat logs. That very afternoon, my phone rang. I picked up, greeted by her incredibly hoarse voice. "Those records," she trailed off. "You saw all of them, didn't you?" "Yeah," I replied. The other end of the line went dead silent for a painfully long time. Finally, she choked out, "I'm so sorry." I'd lost count of how many times she had tossed out an apology lately. But the most utterly useless thing about an apology, it only proves the damage was done. It can never make it unhappen. "My lawyer will handle everything from here," I said, ready to hang up. "Wait, no," she blurted out in a panic. "Arthur, please. I'm not calling about the money or the property. I need to explain. Back then, I honestly wasn't thinking anything of it. I thought you were just being overly sensitive. And I thought Philip was just being a proactive employee. I never in a million years imagined he would." I cut her off right there. "You mean you never expected him to take your complete silence as a green light?" Isabella choked on her words, falling dead silent. I didn't let up. "Isabella, let's be real. Philip is a greedy snake, sure. But every single boundary he crossed with absolute confidence. And guess who gave him that confidence? You did." I could hear her shaky breath through the receiver. "I know. Then face the consequences like an adult." I was a second away from hitting end call when she suddenly blurted, "My parents, they moved out of the villa today." My thumb hovered right over the red button. Terrified I was going to hang up on her, she scrambled to keep talking. My mum was just bawling, her voice trembled over the phone. Marcus was screaming at me too, saying that if I hadn't babied Philip, I wouldn't have dragged our whole family down to rock bottom. On top of that, my dad's creditors showed up at the company again. Now, half our partners are demanding to renegotiate their terms. Her voice cracked, shrinking to a pathetic whisper. "Arthur, I think I've really lost everything." I just stood there, staring out the window at the city below. The streets were packed, the midday sun glaring right in my eyes. "You didn't lose anything," I replied, my voice deadpan. "You pushed it all away yourself." Muffled sobs echoed through the receiver. But this time, I didn't offer a single word of comfort. By that evening, Philip was officially kicked to the curb and held legally accountable for every stunt he pulled. But of course, he wasn't going down without a fight. The guy posted a massive sob story online. He played the ultimate victim, insinuating he was being ruthlessly persecuted by the female CEO and her toxic ex-husband, claiming he was just an innocent blue-collar guy taking the fall for the big boss. He cried about working late hours with Isabella, only to be horribly misunderstood by a jealous partner. He spun this whole narrative about a poor, powerless worker crushed by greedy capitalists, preaching that messy emotional entanglements shouldn't be weaponized to destroy a man's hard-earned career. Believe it or not, people actually fell for it at first. They ate it up. Well, right up until my lawyer dropped a nuclear bomb of hard evidence to both the platform and the cops. Right on cue, Isabella's company released a brutal official statement, listing out every single one of his verified, shady violations. The internet turned on him in seconds. Netizens relentlessly dug up photos of our so-called poor worker flaunting luxury designer gear, crashing at five-star hotels, and living it up in ultra-exclusive private clubs. One comment read, "An ordinary worker wearing a $180,000 brooch, and he still has the nerve to play the victim." Another laughed. After seeing those rigged expense reports, did this clown really think sitting shotgun with the boss meant he could just sleep his way to the top? That last comment was going wildly viral. I just scoffed, locking my phone screen and tossing it aside. Philip's pathetic downfall was completely inevitable, but Isabella's absolute nightmare? That was just getting started. She finally realized that the sweet, loyal puppy she had been desperately protecting was actually a venomous snake, ready to strike her the second things went south. And the ultimate irony? For the sake of that very snake, she threw away the only man who had ever truly stood between her and the raging storm. The sky absolutely poured that night. It was pushing 11 o'clock by the time I finally walked out of the Blue Star corporate headquarters. My lawyer had walked me through the absolute last batch of liquidation documents, finally parting ways with me right at the front lobby doors. The Hart family has absolutely zero room to recover from this, he had told me. You don't need to stress over Richard's massive debts anymore, and the keys to Yunnan Villa have already been handed over. Marcus tried to throw a massive temper tantrum, but one look at the legal letter scared him off like a rat. I just nodded. Then my lawyer gave me a careful look. Did you know your ex-wife came by my office today? I froze, my footsteps pausing for just a split second. What exactly did she say? I asked. She asked how you've been doing lately. I didn't say anything at first, the lawyer sighed. But then I told her, you're doing incredibly well. A faint, hollow smile crossed my face. Thank you, the lawyer nodded. I also told her not to come by again. The sound of the pouring rain was deafening. I popped open my umbrella and barely made it to my car when my eyes locked onto a familiar, pathetic figure shivering under the flickering streetlight. It was Isabella. She didn't even have an umbrella. Her hair and expensive clothes were completely drenched, that pristine white designer shirt clinging desperately to her freezing skin. Standing there in the mud, she looked absolutely nothing like the untouchable, ever-elegant Miss Hart. I stopped dead in my tracks. My driver immediately stepped forward to intercept her, but I just raised a hand, signaling him to stand down. The absolute second Isabella's eyes met mine, they flushed a deep, tearful red. Arthur, she stumbled toward me, her ridiculous high heels sinking into the deep puddles, splashing filthy mud all over her legs. I stood like a statue, not moving a single inch to meet her halfway. When she finally reached me, her voice was shaking violently. I waited out here for 2 whole hours for you. I stared blankly. You didn't have to wait. She flinched, visibly stung by how brutally cold I sounded. Hot tears spilled down her cheeks, washing away in the freezing rain. I know you despise looking at me, but I really, truly don't know who else to turn to. Then go find a lawyer, I said flatly. She frantically shook her head. No, it's not about the money. I just kept staring down at her, offering zero sympathy. Suddenly, her trembling hands pulled a ruined, soaking wet envelope from her designer bag, holding it out to me like a lifeline. This is the apology letter I wrote for you. I know you probably won't even read it, but I still desperately needed to give it to you. I didn't reach for it. Her hand just hung there, freezing in midair, before slowly dropping in defeat. Arthur, I've been obsessing over what happened on the plane that day, she choked out. If the tables were turned, if I saw your female assistant sitting in my first-class seat while you told me to go sit in the back, would I have completely broken down? A pathetic, bitter smile twisted her lips. I would. God, I absolutely would have lost it. She looked up at me, her eyes overflowing with a crushing wave of regret. But when you asked me for basic respect that day, I actually had the nerve to think you were being unreasonable. You didn't just figure that out today, I stated, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Hearing that cold truth made her sob even harder. I know I was insanely arrogant before, she wailed. I thought you would never ever leave me. I thought you were just endlessly patient. I thought you loved me so much that no matter how horribly I ignored you, you'd always just be right there waiting for me. Her voice choked on a massive sob, but after you walked out, I suddenly realized there was no one leaving the porch lights on for me. No one making me warm porridge when I was sick. No one asking if I was freezing when I stumbled in late at night. My mum just screams at me. My dad blames me for everything. Marcus blames me. And every single person at the company is mocking me behind my back. But you know what rips my heart out the most? It's when I sit there in the dark, thinking about how incredibly good you were to me, because I couldn't recall a single, solitary thing I had ever done for you in return. Those gut-wrenching words hung in the air, making the chaotic, rainy night feel dead silent. Looking down at her pathetic, disheveled state, I didn't feel a single drop of vengeful satisfaction. All I felt was a cold, absolute emptiness. Isabella, it's not that you were never good to me. For a split second, a spark of hope lit up in her eyes. But I wasn't done. It's just that, somewhere down the line, you decided you didn't need me anymore. Just like that, the light in her eyes completely died. Arthur, can we please just start over? There it was. She finally said the words I used to pray for. I can change. I'll step back and take things slow with the company. I'll handle my parents, and I swear, I'll take full responsibility for the whole mess with Philip. Please, Arthur, just give me one last chance, okay? She reached out, desperately trying to grab my arm, but I simply took a step back. She grasped at nothing but empty air. Right then, reality finally hit her, and she swayed on her feet like she'd been physically struck. Do you really not love me at all anymore? Her voice trembled. I stood there in complete silence for a long moment. I did love you, I finally admitted. Her tears started pouring down even harder. Then why can't we just try one more time? I stared down at her, my mind flashing back to her bright smile 3 years ago, right when she handed me that very first suitcase. I remembered her sobbing at her desk when her startup crashed and burned. I had cooked her a simple bowl of noodles, and between bites, she whispered, "Thank goodness I have you." I remembered every single lonely night I sat awake in our living room, waiting for her to come home while I reheated her favorite soup over and over and over again. But then, I also remembered Philip sitting in my rightful seat on that plane. I remembered her keeping her head down, flipping through her documents, and coldly tossing out, "Arthur, don't be so immature." All those bittersweet memories crashed together in my head before fading into absolute silence. Because feelings aren't airplane seats, Isabella, I told her calmly. You don't get to just kick someone out and decide who sits where. And just because you're drowning in regret now, doesn't mean I have to come back and save you. Isabella just stared at me, completely shattered. I looked her dead in the eye and spelled it out. It is over. That was the final blow. She collapsed into a crouch in the pouring rain, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry," she wailed. Quietly, I set my umbrella down on the wet pavement right beside her. She instantly looked up, desperately hoping my heart had softened. I just looked down at her and said, "Don't catch a cold. From now on, you need to take care of yourself." With those words, the absolute last glimmer of hope in her eyes completely shattered. I turned my back on her and climbed into my waiting car. The second the door clicked shut, she shot up, desperately pounding her fists against the wet window. "Arthur Black, I know I was wrong. I really know it now. Please, don't go," she screamed. My driver nervously glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Young master?" he asked hesitantly. I just closed my eyes. "Drive," I ordered. The engine purred as the car slowly pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I watched Isabella stumble after us for a few pathetic steps before utterly collapsing onto the rain-soaked street. I never once told the driver to hit the brakes. It wasn't that my heart was made of stone. It was simply because my eyes were finally wide open. Sometimes people fall hard simply because they realize they can no longer catch up to the one person who used to spend their whole life waiting for them. And I was never, ever going to look back again. Fast forward exactly 1 month later, and the dust had finally settled on our divorce proceedings. There wasn't even a messy fight over our marital property. Most of the heavy-hitting assets were locked down as premarital, or I had ironclad proof of my own financial contributions. Those early loans I gave Isabella to keep her company afloat finally entered the repayment phase, and to her credit, she didn't try to play games or drag her feet this time. My stunning Cloud Lake villa was totally vacated once more. When the professional cleaning crew came in to scrub the place, they realized her mother, Margaret, had bolted out of there. She had packed up in such a frantic rush that she actually left behind a massive pile of expensive designer junk in the walk-in closet that she just couldn't carry. I didn't even bother going over to inspect the mess. I just ordered my team to box every single item up and ship it directly to Isabella's new doorstep. As for her brother Richard's massive gambling debts, the Hart family was completely on their own. Word on the street is they had to sell their old family house and shamelessly beg their relatives for loans. And ironically, those same snobby relatives who had mercilessly mocked me on that doomed flight. Yeah, shocker. Very few of them were actually willing to open their wallets and help. Her spoiled younger brother Marcus absolutely got the worst of it. His flashy sports car was swiftly repossessed, and I personally made sure his limitless black card was permanently cancelled. His once boastful social media feeds went dead quiet, no more popping bottles at VIP clubs or flexing fancy rides. The rumour mill says he even tried to confront Philip, and the two losers nearly threw down in a pathetic brawl right outside the local police station. Speaking of Philip, once the absolute weight of the law came crashing down and he was officially prosecuted, his whole gentle, devoted male secretary act completely crumbled to dust. All of his so-called deep affection for Isabella, it ultimately just dissolved into a massive stack of legal bills and damning court evidence. And Isabella herself, she ended up having to ruthlessly gut her own staff, laying off a huge chunk of employees while completely tearing down and rebuilding her company's operations from scratch. The grapevine says she's become a totally different person, cold, incredibly quiet, and absolutely refusing to let any new assistant get even an inch close to her personal life. These little tidbits of gossip still manage to reach my ears from time to time, but honestly, I just let them drift right on by. Whether she's evolved into a saint or hit rock bottom, it has absolutely nothing to do with my life anymore. Then, later that afternoon, my private pilot, Captain Colin, gave me a ring. "Sir, regarding that luxury island flight path you had me cancel last month, should we go ahead and reactivate it for today?" I stood quietly by my massive corner office window, just taking in the sprawling city skyline. That tropical getaway was originally supposed to be the dream vacation Isabella desperately wanted to treat her family to. She used to always talk about how, after grinding for years, she finally wanted to give her demanding parents a taste of pure, unadulterated luxury. And like a fool, I had busted my back arranging every single detail for her. The absolute smoothest flight route, a jaw-dropping 5-star resort, and the most perfectly secluded private bay money could buy. But when push came to shove, she literally handed my damn seat over to another man. I took a deep breath. "Activate it," I ordered. Colin paused. "Understood, boss. Is the passenger list remaining the same?" I glanced down at the freshly printed, glossy itinerary resting on my mahogany desk. This time around, there were absolutely no toxic Hart family members, 0 stuck-up executives from Isabella's company, and definitely no scumbag Philip. It was just going to be me, kicking back with a few of my truest day-one friends. When my lawyer caught wind of the new plans, he laughed so hard he nearly choked. "What, is this some kind of epic divorce celebration trip?" he joked. I just smirked. "Yeah, you could say that." He gave my shoulder a solid brotherly pat. "Hell yeah, that's what I like to hear. It is high time you finally started living life for yourself, Arthur." The day I finally set off for the island, the weather couldn't have been more picture perfect. With the sun shining, I confidently dragged that beat-up old suitcase right back into the airport. Yeah, the exact same one Isabella had gifted me 3 long years ago, only this time I was moving on to a better life. "Mr. Black, would you like me to get you a new one?" my assistant asked. I glanced down, slowly shaking my head. No need. Some things don't have to be thrown away. Keeping it doesn't mean I'm still desperately holding on. It's just a brutal reminder to myself. A reminder that I once gave my absolute everything, only to finally wake up with perfect clarity. At the private entrance, Colin was waiting with the flight crew. When he saw me, he gave his usual, respectful nod. "Young master." I nodded back and strode right up the gangway. This time, I didn't freeze at the cabin door, and there was no one stealing my spot. Seat 1A was completely empty, bathed in warm sunlight from the window. Clean, quiet, and mine. The second I sat down, my phone buzzed. A message from Isabella. "I heard you're heading to the island today. Safe travels." A few seconds ticked by before another text popped up. "About that last trip. I really wanted to go with you, properly." Now I realize I missed out on way more than just a journey. I stared dead at the screen, completely unfazed, and didn't type a single word. Some pathetic apologies just don't deserve a response, and some blown chances definitely don't get a second ticket. Right before the plane began to taxi, Colin walked up to me. His tone was dead serious, just like it had been exactly a month ago. "Young master, are we clear for takeoff?" I turned my gaze out the window. The distant runway stretched out endlessly under a brilliantly bright sky. Suddenly, my mind flashed back to that humiliating day at the airport. Isabella standing right at the cabin door, her face ghostly pale as she watched me. She was so sure I would turn back. Everyone thought I was just throwing a childish tantrum, but they had absolutely no clue. The moment a man finally snaps out of his delusions and truly wakes up, there are no dramatic roars. He simply takes back everything he gave, reclaims his rightful place, and takes back himself. I clicked my seatbelt into place and spoke with chilling calm. "Take off." As the jet roared and soared into the sky, Isabella didn't even cross my mind. Above the heavy clouds, the sun was blindingly bright, and this time, my place would never, ever be given to anyone else.